The ink flowed from Grace Riley's brush in elegant strokes across the pristine paper, forming delicate curves and precise lines that seemed to dance together in perfect harmony. She had always found solace in calligraphy, the ancient art of beautiful writing, but today her concentration was split between her craft and the chattering teenage girl sitting beside her. "This is so much harder than it looks on Instagram," complained Lily Foster, her nose scrunched in frustration as she tried to mimic Grace's fluid movements. "How do you make it look so effortless?" Grace smiled encouragingly at her 15-year-old student. "It's all about patience and practice, Lily. I've been doing this for years." She gently adjusted Lily's grip on the brush pen. "Relax your wrist a bit more. Let the strokes flow naturally." The afternoon light streamed through the large windows of Grace's small studio apartment, which doubled as her workspace. Various calligraphy pieces adorned the walls, quotes, poems, and commissioned works that showcased her talent. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a testament to her decision 3 years ago to leave her stable but soul-crushing corporate job to pursue her passion. "There you go," Grace nodded approvingly as Lily made a more confident stroke. "Beautiful improvement. My brother would never believe I'm actually learning something useful," Lily said with a roll of her eyes. "He thinks I just jump from hobby to hobby." Grace had heard mentions of Lily's brother before apparently. He was the one who paid for these lessons, though Grace had never met him. Lily was always dropped off and picked up by their family driver. "Well, you're proving him wrong," Grace replied. "You've been coming consistently for 3 weeks now. That's dedication." As the hour wound down, Grace demonstrated one final flourish technique, then helped Lily gather her supplies. "For next week, practice those lowercase connections we worked on today. Remember, it's about muscle memory." Lily nodded, carefully placing her practice sheets in a folder. "My brother is actually picking me up today. The driver has the day off." "That's nice," Grace said absently as she cleaned her brushes. She glanced at her watch. She had another student in an hour, which gave her just enough time to grab a quick coffee from the shop downstairs. The doorbell rang, and Lily bounced up. That must be him. Grace walked over to open the door, still wiping ink from her fingers with a cloth. She pulled the door open, a polite greeting ready on her lips, but the words died in her throat. The man standing in her doorway was nothing like she had imagined Lily's brother would be. Tall and broad-shouldered, with striking blue eyes that seemed to assess everything in an instant, he exuded an aura of effortless authority. His tailored suit probably cost more than her rent, yet he wore it with casual confidence. Dark hair was styled in a way that looked both perfectly arranged and slightly tousled. "Zach," Lily exclaimed, rushing past Grace. "You're actually on time," the corner of his mouth quirked up. "Don't sound so surprised." His voice was deep, with a slight rasp that sent an unexpected shiver down Grace's spine. "You must be Miss Riley," he said, extending his hand. "Zachary Foster, thank you for your patience with my sister. I understand she can be quite the handful." "Hey," Lily protested. Grace found her voice and shook his hand, immediately aware of her ink-stained fingers. "Grace Riley. And Lily's been a wonderful student, actually. She has natural talent." Something flickered in Zachary Foster's eyes, surprise, perhaps before he smiled properly. The transformation was startling. Suddenly he looked younger, more approachable. "That's not what her piano teacher said," he commented dryly. "Or her pottery teacher," Lily admitted. "But this is different. I really like calligraphy." Zachary's gaze swept around Grace's apartment, taking in the artwork, the organized chaos of her supplies, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with art books and novels. Grace fought the urge to straighten her simple dress or touch her hair. which she knew was probably coming loose from its bun after bending over her work for hours. "Your work is impressive," he said, gesturing to a framed piece on the wall, an intricate rendering of a Robert Frost poem that had taken her weeks to perfect. "Thank you," Grace replied, genuinely pleased. Most people didn't truly appreciate the technical skill involved in what she did. "It's a passion. Zach owns a bunch of galleries," Lily informed Grace. "He's kind of an art snob. I prefer discerning collector," he corrected with a hint of humor. "Are you ready to go, Lily? I have a meeting at 6. "Yeah, just let me grab my bag." As Lily disappeared into the bathroom, an awkward silence fell between Grace and Zachary. She was acutely aware of how different they must appear, he in his perfectly tailored suit that screamed money and influence. She in her paint-splattered jeans and simple white blouse with ink stains on the cuffs. "Lily mentioned you've been doing this for some time," he said, breaking the silence. "Professionally for about 3 years," Grace replied. "But I've been practicing since I was about Lily's age. And it's sustainable." The question wasn't condescending, merely curious. Grace smiled. "I teach classes at the community center, do commission work for weddings and events, and have private students like Lily. It's not making me rich, but I'm doing what I love." Something unreadable crossed his face. "That's rare." Before she could respond, Lily returned, shouldering her bag. "I'm ready. See you next week, Grace." "It was nice to meet you, Miss Riley," Zachary said, his formality returning as he handed her a business card. "If there's anything Lily needs or if you have any concerns, please don't hesitate to contact me directly." The card was heavy, expensive stock minimalist white with embossed black text. "Zachary Foster, CEO, Foster Enterprises." Below that, a phone number and email address. "Thank you, Mr. Foster," she replied, equally formal. As they left, Grace closed the door behind them and leaned against it, looking down at the card in her hand. Foster Enterprises, even she had heard of the multinational corporation with interests in everything from real estate to publishing. Which meant that Zachary Foster wasn't just wealthy. He was in a financial stratosphere she couldn't even comprehend. She placed the card on her desk, shaking her head at herself. It didn't matter who he was or how much money he had. He was simply the brother of one of her students, nothing more, nothing less. Yet as she prepared for her next lesson, she found her thoughts drifting back to those piercing blue eyes that had seemed to see right through her. Zachary Foster drummed his fingers against the leather seat as his driver navigated through the afternoon traffic. Beside him, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, tapping away at her phone. "So," he said finally, "you actually enjoy these calligraphy lessons?" Lily looked up. "Yeah, I really do. Grace is amazing at what she does, and she's not stuffy or boring like most teachers." Zach nodded, his mind returning to the small, sun-drenched apartment with its walls of art. He hadn't expected to be so struck by the place or its occupant. Grace Riley had seemed completely at ease in her own skin, confident in her craft in a way that many artists he'd met through his galleries weren't. There was something refreshing about her lack of pretension. "She's not what I expected," he admitted. Lily gave him a curious look. "What did you expect?" he shrugged. "I don't know. Someone older maybe, more academic." "Grace is only 28, Lily informed him, "and she used to work in marketing or something before she quit to do calligraphy full-time. She said it was terrifying but the best decision she ever made." Zach raised an eyebrow. It wasn't often people walked away from stable careers to pursue something as precarious as art. He found himself oddly impressed by her courage. "Anyway," Lily continued, "I really want to stick with it this time. I even practice between lessons." "That's a first," Zach commented dryly, though he was pleased. At 15, Lily had been through a series of abandoned hobbies and interests, each started with enthusiasm and discarded weeks later. Their parents' deaths 3 years ago had only amplified her restlessness. As her guardian, he tried to provide stability while giving her room to find herself, but it wasn't always easy balancing her needs with running a global business. "Don't be a jerk," Lily said without heat. "Grace says I have natural artistic sensibility." "Well, if Grace says so," he replied with a small smile. His phone buzzed, and he glanced down at an urgent email from his CFO. The momentary respite from work thoughts evaporated as he was pulled back into the demands of Foster Enterprises. By the time they reached their penthouse apartment, his mind was fully occupied with preparations for the evening's meeting with potential investors. Yet later that night, as he reviewed quarterly reports in his home office, his eyes drifted to the shelves of art books along one wall. On impulse, he rose and selected a volume on modern calligraphy, one he'd purchased for a gallery exhibition last year, but never actually opened. He flipped through pages of elegant lettering and ornate designs, seeing them with new appreciation as he recalled the precise, confident movements of Grace's hands. Zachary Foster was a man accustomed to recognizing value in unexpected places. It was what had helped him expand his father's already successful company into new territories after taking over at 25. Now, at 33, he had a reputation for strategic vision and calculated risks. Yet something told him that Grace Riley might represent a risk of an entirely different nature, one he hadn't calculated for at all. The following Tuesday, Grace was demonstrating a particularly challenging Gothic lettering style to Lily when her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then frowned. "Everything okay?" Lily asked, looking up from her practice sheet. "Just my evening student canceling," Grace sighed. "That's the third time this month. I might have to drop her from my schedule." "That sucks," Lily said sympathetically. "How many students do you have, anyway?" "6 private students, plus the community center classes twice a week." Grace carefully put down her brush. "Honestly, I could use more, but finding students who can afford private lessons and are actually committed is challenging." "Maybe Zach could help," Lily suggested brightly. "He knows tons of people. Some of them must have kids who need hobbies." Grace smiled at the teenager's enthusiasm. "That's sweet, but I doubt your brother moves in circles where calligraphy lessons are a priority." "You'd be surprised," Lily said with a knowing look. "His assistant is always looking for unique gifts for business associates. Custom calligraphy could be perfect." Grace considered this for a moment. It wasn't a bad idea, actually. Corporate commissions paid well, and she had done some in the past. "I'll think about it," she promised, not wanting to seem too eager. The truth was, business had been slower than usual lately, and with rent increases looming, she could use the additional income. They returned to their lesson, and Grace pushed the thought from her mind. It would be presumptuous to approach Zachary Foster for business connections based on one brief meeting. When the lesson ended, Grace was surprised to see Zachary himself at the door again, instead of the usual driver. "Twice in 2 weeks," she commented as she let him in. "To what do we owe this honor, Lily?" "He's probably checking to make sure I'm actually learning something," Lily replied with good-natured sarcasm. Zachary looked different today, slightly less formal in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes, though he still exuded that unmistakable aura of authority. "Actually," he said, "I had a meeting nearby and thought I'd save Thomas a trip." His gaze fell on the practice sheet spread across Grace's work table. "May I?" "Of course," Grace replied, stepping back as he examined Lily's work. "This is remarkable progress," he said, genuine surprise in his voice as he compared last week's efforts with today's more confident strokes. "Told you," Lily said smugly. "Grace is a great teacher." Zachary turned those discerning eyes toward Grace, who felt a flush creep up her neck. "She must be," he agreed. "These are impressive results for just a few weeks." "Lily's a quick study when she applies herself," Grace replied, deflecting the compliment. "And she practices between lessons, which makes all the difference." "While you pack up, Lily, I actually wanted to ask Miss Riley something," Zachary said, turning more fully toward Grace. "Grace, please," she corrected. "Miss Riley makes me feel like a school teacher." His lips quirked. "Grace, then. I'm hosting a charity auction next month for the Foster Foundation. It focuses on arts education for underprivileged youth. We're looking for unique items and experiences to auction off. Would you be interested in contributing a calligraphy package? We'd compensate you for materials, of course, and it would be excellent exposure." Grace blinked in surprise. This was unexpected. "What kind of package did you have in mind?" "Perhaps a custom piece, or a series of personalized stationery. Or even a private lesson." He gestured around the apartment. "Your work is exceptional. I'm sure it would generate significant interest." Grace felt warmth spread through her chest at his assessment of her work. Coming from someone who owned galleries and clearly knew art, it meant something. "I'd be happy to contribute," she said. "Maybe a custom piece along with a beginner's lesson for the winning bidder." "Perfect," he replied with a smile that transformed his face again. "My assistant will contact you with the details, if you don't mind sharing your email." Grace wrote her information on a scrap of paper, suddenly conscious of her messy handwriting when not doing formal calligraphy. "You collect art as well as sell it?" she asked, genuinely curious about his personal interest in the field. A shadow passed briefly over his face. "My parents started the collection. After they passed, I continued building it. Art was my mother's passion." "I'm sorry about your parents," Grace said softly, understanding now why he seemed to be raising Lily. "That must have been difficult for both of you." He nodded briefly, something guarded coming into his expression. "Thank you. It was 3 years ago." "Car accident," Lily supplied, rejoining them with her packed bag. "I was 12. Zach was 30. Grace's heart went out to them both, Lily losing her parents at such a formative age, and Zachary suddenly becoming responsible for a grieving adolescent while presumably managing the family business. "The foundation was my way of honoring my mother's commitment to arts education," Zachary added, his tone more businesslike now. "She believed creativity was essential to development, not just an extracurricular activity." "She sounds like a wise woman," Grace replied, "and I completely agree. Art teaches patience, perspective, attention to detail, skills that transfer to every aspect of life." Something shifted in Zachary's expression, a flicker of genuine interest, replacing the polite business demeanor. "Exactly what my mother used to say," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, an unexpected connection that made Grace's heart beat a little faster. Then Lily cleared her throat. "Are we getting dinner or what? I'm starving." Zachary checked his watch. "We have reservations at Mercado in 20 minutes. He turned back to Grace. "Thank you for agreeing to participate in the auction. My assistant will be in touch soon." "I look forward to it," she replied. After they left, Grace stood in her suddenly quiet apartment, replaying the conversation. There had been something in the way he looked at her when she'd spoken about art, a recognition, perhaps, or appreciation. For a moment, he hadn't been Zachary Foster, billionaire CEO, but simply a man who understood the value of creativity. The thought was both intriguing and dangerous. Developing any kind of personal interest in Lily's older brother would be complicated on multiple levels. not least because he inhabited a world so different from her own. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation she felt at the prospect of seeing him again. 3 days later, Grace received an email from Alexandra Bennett, executive assistant to Zachary Foster, detailing the charity auction and requesting a formal description of her donation for the catalog. The email was professional and impersonal, as she'd expected. What she hadn't expected was the personal note at the end. Mr. Foster suggested you might also be interested in discussing potential commissioned work for corporate gifts. If this is of interest, please let me know a convenient time to call. Grace stared at her screen, a smile spreading across her face. Apparently, Lily had mentioned their conversation to her brother, and he had actually followed up on it. Corporate commissions could be extremely lucrative, exactly the kind of steady work that would help stabilize her sometimes unpredictable income. She crafted a careful response, attaching images of corporate work she'd done in the past and suggesting several times for a call. Within minutes, her phone rang, not Alexandra Bennett but Zachary Foster himself. "Grace," he said when she answered, his deep voice instantly recognizable. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." "Not at all," she replied, glancing at the half-finished commission on her desk. "I was just taking a break." "Good. I wanted to discuss the corporate gift idea personally. We send customized presents to our top clients and partners quarterly, and I've been looking for something more unique than the usual wine baskets and gift cards." "Personalized calligraphy would certainly be distinctive," Grace agreed, trying to keep her voice professional despite her excitement. "I could create custom quotes, personalized stationery, even artistic representations of company achievements or milestones." "Exactly what I was thinking," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Alexandra will send over our client list and budget parameters. Would you be able to prepare some preliminary concepts by next week? I could stop by after Lily's lesson to review them." "That would be perfect," Grace said, already mentally sketching designs. "Excellent. Oh, and Grace." His tone shifted slightly. "This isn't charity. Your work is impressive and I believe our clients will value it. I'm simply connecting talent with opportunity." The statement caught her off guard. Had he sensed her slight concern that this might be a pity project? "I appreciate that," she said honestly, "and I promise your clients will receive my best work." After they hung up, Grace sat back in her chair, a mixture of emotions washing over her. Professional excitement at the potential new business direction, certainly, but also a flutter of something else at the prospect of seeing Zachary Foster again, something she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The following week was a whirlwind of creativity and preparation. By Monday, Grace had designed sample concepts for 5 different corporate gift approaches, carefully tailored to the client profiles Alexandra had sent. She'd stayed up late several nights, wanting everything to be perfect for her presentation to Zachary. Tuesday arrived and Lily's lesson went well, though Grace found herself glancing at the clock more often than usual. "You seem distracted today," Lily observed shrewdly as they wrapped up. "Is it because Zach is coming to look at your corporate stuff?" Grace flushed slightly. "I just want to make a good impression, professionally speaking. This could be a significant opportunity for my business." Lily gave her a knowing look that made Grace wonder if she was being more transparent than she'd intended. Before she could say anything else, the doorbell rang, announcing Zachary's arrival. He looked as immaculate as ever in a charcoal suit that was somehow both conservative and cutting edge. The contrast between his polished appearance and Grace's creative space was striking, yet he moved through her apartment with surprising comfort. "How was the lesson?" he asked Lily while his eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on the portfolio Grace had prepared. "Great. I'm learning cursive flourishes now," Lily reported. "Can I go downstairs and get a smoothie while you two talk business? The cafe has a new mango one I want to try." Zachary nodded, handing her some cash. "Don't wander off. We won't be long." When Lily had departed, a curious silence fell. It was the first time Grace had been truly alone with Zachary, and she suddenly felt unaccountably nervous. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, gesturing to the electric kettle in her small kitchenette. "Please," he replied, loosening his tie slightly, a small gesture that humanized him somehow. As Grace prepared 2 cups of Earl Grey, Zachary examined a new piece she had hanging near her workspace, an elaborate rendering of a Shakespeare sonnet. "Your attention to detail is extraordinary," he commented. "Most people wouldn't notice the subtle differences in pressure and stroke that give each letter its character." Grace handed him a cup, surprised by his observation. "Most people don't," she agreed. "How do you know about calligraphic technique?" Something like embarrassment crossed his face. "My mother collected historical manuscripts. I grew up learning to appreciate the craftsmanship involved." He took a sip of tea. "These days, I'm more involved with contemporary art through our galleries, but I still have an eye for precision." Grace led him to her work table where the portfolio lay. "Well, I hope these concepts meet your standards," she said, opening the leather-bound folder to reveal her designs. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed her proposals in detail. Zachary asked insightful questions, suggested minor adjustments, and showed genuine appreciation for her creative approach. His business acumen was evident in how quickly he assessed each concept's suitability for different clients, but it was tempered with respect for her artistic judgment. "These exceed my expectations," he said finally, indicating 3 designs he wanted to proceed with immediately. "Alexandra will send formal approval and production timelines tomorrow." "Thank you," Grace replied, warmth spreading through her at his approval. "I'm excited to get started." Zachary hesitated, then added, "There's something else I wanted to discuss. The Foster Foundation is launching a new program to bring arts education to schools that have lost funding for creative programs. We're looking for instructors willing to teach master classes. Would you be interested in participating?" Grace's eyes widened. "Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of outreach I've always wanted to do but never had the resources for. The foundation would provide all necessary materials and compensation for your time," he explained. "We're particularly interested in reaching high schools in underserved communities." "When would this start?" she asked, already imagining how she'd structure such classes. "We're aiming for next month. I could send you the details." A thought struck Grace. "Actually, would you like to stay for dinner? We could discuss it further, and I could show you some of the teaching materials I've developed for my community center classes." The invitation surprised them both. Zachary looked momentarily taken aback, and Grace immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. After all, he was essentially becoming a client, and he was certainly busy with more important matters. "I mean, if you don't have other plans," she added quickly. "It's nothing fancy, just pasta I was planning to make, but I'd like that," he interrupted, his expression softening. "If you're sure it's not an imposition." "Not at all," Grace replied, relieved. "I always make too much anyway." They settled into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm, as Grace prepared a simple meal of lemon garlic pasta with roasted vegetables. Zachary insisted on helping, rolling up his sleeves to chop vegetables while Grace showed him her teaching materials. They discussed approaches to arts education, the importance of creative expression for young people, and their shared belief in making art accessible to everyone. Most people see calligraphy as an outdated skill, Grace said as she stirred the pasta. They don't understand its relevance in a digital world. But that's precisely what makes it valuable now, Zachary replied. It's tactile, personal, imperfect in the most perfect way. It represents the human touch in an increasingly automated existence. Grace looked at him with new appreciation. Exactly. That's what I try to convey to my students. Every handwritten note carries part of yourself with it. It's intimate in a way digital communication can never be. Their conversation flowed naturally through dinner, moving from art to books to travel. Grace discovered that beneath Zachary's reserved exterior was a thoughtful, well-read man with a dry sense of humor and surprising depth. In turn, he seemed genuinely interested in her journey from reluctant marketing executive to passionate calligraphy artist. What finally made you take the leap? He asked as they finished their meal. Leaving a secure job couldn't have been easy. Grace considered the question. My father got sick, she said quietly, pancreatic cancer. It was quick, just 3 months from diagnosis to... She paused. Watching someone you love run out of time changes your perspective. I realized I didn't want to spend my life doing something that didn't matter to me. Zachary's expression turned solemn. I'm sorry about your father. Thank you, she replied. It was 5 years ago now. But it changed everything for me. I started taking calligraphy classes as a way to process grief, actually. There was something meditative about forming each letter with care and intention. And now you're teaching others, he observed. She smiled. Full circle, I suppose. What about you? Did you always know you'd take over the family business? A shadow crossed his face. It was expected, certainly. I was being groomed for it from an early age. MBA from Wharton, internships at every level of the company. But when my parents died, the timeline accelerated dramatically. And suddenly you were responsible for Lily too, Grace added softly. He nodded. She needed stability more than anything else, so I stepped up. The simple statement revealed so much about his character. Despite his wealth and position, Zachary Foster was fundamentally a man who took his responsibilities seriously to his sister, his company, his parents' legacy. They were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening as Lily returned, looking between them with undisguised curiosity. You're still here, she said to her brother. And you guys had dinner. Her gaze took in the plates on the table. Grace was kind enough to invite me to stay while we discussed the Foundation's education program, Zachary replied smoothly. But we should be going, you have homework. Lily rolled her eyes but didn't protest. As they prepared to leave, Grace handed Zachary a folder with her teaching materials. These might be helpful for developing the program, she said. And thank you for the opportunity, both the corporate commission and the foundation work. Thank you for dinner, he replied. It was unexpected but thoroughly enjoyed. There was a moment, brief but charged, where their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Then Lily cleared her throat dramatically, breaking the spell. Good night, Grace, Zachary said, his professional demeanor returning as he guided Lily toward the door. Good night, she replied, watching them leave with a curious mixture of emotions she wasn't quite ready to name. As the door closed behind them, Grace leaned against it, her mind replaying the evening's conversations. She'd seen a different side of Zachary Foster tonight, not the billionaire businessman, but a man with depth, intelligence, and unexpected vulnerability. It was this version of him, she realized with a jolt, that she found herself drawn to. And that was a complication she hadn't anticipated at all. Over the next 3 weeks, Grace found herself busier than she had been in months. The corporate commission from Foster Enterprises involved creating personalized calligraphy pieces for 20 top clients, each requiring meticulous attention to detail. Additionally, she was developing curriculum for the Foundation's arts program, which would launch in 4 schools across the city. Her regular lessons with Lily continued every Tuesday, but Zachary hadn't returned since their dinner together. Sometimes Thomas, the driver, picked Lily up. Other times she left with a friend whose mother was waiting downstairs. Grace tried not to feel disappointed, telling herself it was perfectly normal. He was a busy executive, after all, with far more important matters than chauffeuring his sister. Still, she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering his insightful comments about her work. The way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled genuinely, how comfortable he had seemed in her kitchen, despite being so obviously out of his usual environment. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Grace was carefully packaging completed corporate gifts when her phone rang. Alexandra Bennett's name appeared on the screen. "Hello, Alexandra," Grace answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued wrapping a framed piece. "Grace, good afternoon. I'm calling about the charity auction this Saturday. Mr. Foster wondered if you might be available to attend as his guest. He thinks it would be beneficial for you to see how your donation is received and to meet some potential clients who might be interested in private commissions." Grace nearly dropped the package. "This Saturday, at the Foster Foundation Gala?" "Yes, at the Meridian Hotel downtown. Black tie, beginning at 7. Mr. Foster would send a car for you, of course." Grace's mind raced. The Foster Foundation Gala was one of the premier charity events of the season. She'd seen it covered in local media, but never imagined attending. "That's very kind of him," she replied, trying to sound composed. "Please tell Mr. Foster I'd be delighted to attend." "Excellent. The car will collect you at 6:30. Mr. Foster suggested you might want this information in advance for preparation purposes." Grace's phone chimed with a forwarded message containing the event details, dress code, and schedule. It was thoughtful of him to provide this. Many people in his position wouldn't consider how intimidating such an event might be for someone unaccustomed to high society functions. After hanging up, Grace sat motionless for several moments, processing what had just happened. Was this purely professional a genuine opportunity to network and promote her business? Or was there something more personal in the invitation? Either way, she had a more immediate concern. She didn't own anything remotely appropriate for a black tie gala. An emergency call to her friend Hannah resulted in a shopping trip that afternoon. After visiting 3 boutiques, Grace found a gown she could actually afford, a deep emerald silk that complemented her auburn hair and fell in simple, elegant lines to the floor. It was more money than she usually spent on clothes, but Hannah insisted it was an investment in her business. "Besides," Hannah added as Grace examined her reflection, "you look absolutely stunning. If Zachary Foster doesn't notice, he's blind." "This is professional," Grace protested, though her blush betrayed her. "He's a client now," Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Keep telling yourself that, sweetie." When Saturday evening arrived, Grace was a bundle of nerves. She'd spent extra time on her appearance, styling her usually practical hair into soft waves and applying makeup with more care than usual. The emerald dress fit perfectly, and she'd paired it with simple gold jewelry and the only pair of heels she owned. Precisely at 6:30, her phone buzzed with a text announcing the car's arrival. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her small clutch and headed downstairs. The vehicle waiting outside wasn't the town car she'd expected, but a sleek black Bentley. The driver held the door open with formal courtesy, and Grace slid onto buttery leather seats, feeling distinctly out of place. 20 minutes later, They pulled up to the Meridian Hotel's grand entrance, where red carpets stretched beneath a massive awning. Photographers lined the arrival area, capturing images of well-heeled attendees. Grace's stomach tightened with anxiety. She hadn't considered this aspect of the evening, the public nature of arriving at such a high-profile event. Before she could panic, the car door opened, and Zachary Foster himself stood there, handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he took in her appearance. "Grace," he said, extending his hand to help her from the car. "You look absolutely beautiful." The simple compliment, delivered in that low, slightly raspy voice, sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she replied. "This is all a bit more elaborate than I expected." His lips quirked in understanding. "Just stay beside me. We'll walk straight in." True to his word, he guided her past the photographers with a protective hand at the small of her back. A few cameras flashed in their direction, but Zachary moved with practiced efficiency, acknowledging the press with brief nods while maintaining their forward momentum. Inside, the hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a glittering wonderland of crystal, flowers, and elegant lighting. At least 300 people milled about in formal attire, sipping champagne and examining the silent auction displays arranged around the perimeter. "Your work is displayed in the featured section," Zachary informed her, still keeping a gentle hand at her back as he guided her through the crowd. The foundation's board selected certain items for special promotion. Grace felt a flutter of pride as they approached the display area. Her donation, an elaborate calligraphic rendering of a Tennyson poem framed in antique gold, along with a certificate for a private lesson, was prominently positioned with atmospheric lighting. A small crowd had already gathered around it. "Miss Riley is the artist," Zachary announced to the group, his voice carrying a note of unmistakable pride. Several faces turned toward her with interest. For the next 20 minutes, Grace found herself engaged in conversations about her technique, her influences, and her teaching methods. Zachary remained beside her, occasionally adding comments that highlighted her expertise or the unique qualities of her work. "You're quite the advocate," she murmured to him when there was finally a lull. "It's easy to promote excellence," he replied simply. "Would you like some champagne?" He procured 2 glasses from a passing waiter, then guided her toward a slightly quieter corner of the room. "How are you holding up? These events can be overwhelming." His consideration touched her. "I'm fine, actually. Everyone has been very kind. And it's exciting to see my work getting this kind of attention. The bidding on your piece is already quite competitive," he informed her with a smile. "Alexandra has been monitoring it. You may have to schedule several lessons before this is over." Grace laughed. "I certainly won't complain about that." As they talked, she became aware of curious glances from other attendees. It occurred to her that Zachary Foster attending the gala with an unknown woman might be generating speculation. The thought made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to become fodder for society gossip. "People are staring," she noted quietly. Zachary's expression remained impassive. "People always stare. It means nothing. Still, I don't want to create awkward situations for you. This is your foundation's event after all." His eyes met hers directly. "Grace, I invited you because I wanted your company this evening. The professional benefits are real, but they're not why you're here." The simple statement sent her heart racing. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by a tall, elegant woman in a stunning red gown. "Zachary, darling," the woman purred, air kissing both his cheeks. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Vanessa," he acknowledged with polite coolness. "Allow me to introduce Grace Riley." "Grace, this is Vanessa Harrington, one of our foundation's board members. Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose as she assessed Grace. "How lovely to meet you. Are you new to our little charitable circle?" The question carried a subtle barb that Grace immediately recognized. "I'm actually one of the artists donating work for tonight's auction," she replied calmly. "And I'll be teaching in the Foundation's new education program." "How marvelous," Vanessa said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She turned back to Zachary. "The Whitakers were asking after you. They're considering increasing their annual contribution." "I'll find them shortly," he promised. "But first, I want to show Grace the rest of the auction items." It was a clear dismissal, and Vanessa's mouth tightened briefly before she nodded and moved away. "I'm sorry about that," Zachary said quietly once she was out of earshot. "Vanessa can be territorial. Former girlfriend," Grace guessed, keeping her tone light despite the unexpected flare of jealousy she felt. "Brief, ill-advised entanglement," he corrected. 2 years ago. She's been angling to rekindle things ever since." Grace nodded, unsure how to respond. The reminder of Zachary's world populated by stunning socialites like Vanessa, with their perfect pedigrees and sophisticated understanding of his lifestyle, made her acutely aware of their differences. As if sensing her discomfort, Zachary placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Would you like to see something? A private collection most guests don't get to view." Curious, Grace nodded, and he led her away from the main ballroom down a corridor and into a smaller room secured by keycard access. Inside, glass cases displayed a collection of historical manuscripts and rare books. "These are from my mother's personal collection," Zachary explained as Grace gasped in appreciation. "We rotate selections for each Foundation event, but they're not part of the general display." Grace moved from case to case in wonder, examining medieval illuminated manuscripts, 18th-century letter collections, and rare first editions. One display in particular caught her attention, a collection of personal correspondence between a soldier and his wife during World War I. The handwriting evolving from formal and careful to increasingly intimate and free-flowing. "These are extraordinary," she breathed, leaning closer to examine the delicate script. "The emotional journey visible just in the handwriting is incredible." Zachary watched her with a soft expression she'd never seen before. "That's exactly what my mother used to say about this collection. She believed handwriting revealed the soul in ways words alone couldn't." "She was right," Grace replied, looking up to find him standing closer than she'd realized. "You can feel the growing intimacy between them with each letter." Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Zachary slowly reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "I find myself thinking about you far more than is professionally appropriate," he admitted quietly. Grace's heart thundered in her chest. "Is that why you invited me tonight?" "Partly," he acknowledged. "I told myself it was a business opportunity for you, but the truth is, I've been looking for an excuse to see you again." The honesty in his voice gave her courage. "I've missed seeing you at Lily's lessons." A smile tugged at his mouth. "I've been deliberately staying away. I wasn't sure if our dinner together had been presumptuous on my part." Grace shook her head. "It wasn't. I enjoyed talking with you. Getting to know the real Zachary Foster, not just the CEO." His expression grew serious. "The CEO is part of who I am, Grace. My life comes with complications, expectations, public scrutiny, things that aren't fair to draw others into without fair warning." "Are you warning me off?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm giving you information," he replied carefully. "What you do with it is entirely your choice." Before she could respond, the door opened and Alexandra appeared. "Mr. Foster, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the auction closing announcements are beginning and your presence is requested." Zachary nodded. "We'll be right there." As Alexandra withdrew, he turned back to Grace. "We should continue this conversation later, perhaps dinner after the event." "I'd like that," she replied, her pulse still racing from their exchange. They returned to the ballroom just as the live auction portion was beginning. Grace's donation had indeed generated significant interest, eventually selling for nearly 4 times her usual commission rate. The successful bidder, a distinguished older woman who was apparently a serious art collector, immediately sought Grace out to discuss scheduling her lesson and potential additional commissions. Throughout the remainder of the evening, Zachary was pulled in multiple directions by donors, board members, and social obligations. Yet he always seemed aware of where Grace was, periodically checking in or introducing her to people who might appreciate her work. His attentiveness was subtle but constant, making her feel neither abandoned nor smothered. As the event wound down near midnight, Zachary found her by the dessert table. "Are you still up for dinner? There's a small restaurant nearby that stays open late for post-event gatherings." "I'd love to," Grace replied, "though I should warn you I'm starting to feel the effects of these heels." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "We can take them off in the car." 20 minutes later, they were seated in a discreet corner of an elegant Italian restaurant. Grace had indeed removed her shoes in the car, earning a sympathetic chuckle from Zachary, who admitted his own formal shoes were less than comfortable. The small confession of discomfort had somehow humanized him further. Now, as they shared a late dinner of risotto and wine, the conversation they'd begun in the manuscript room continued. "I've never dated anyone in the public eye," Grace admitted after Zachary explained the scrutiny that often accompanied his personal life. "I can understand why it would be challenging. It creates pressure that can strain even the strongest relationships," he said. "Add in my responsibilities to Lilly and Foster Enterprises, and it's a lot to ask of someone." Grace considered this. "Is that why you're still single? The complications?" He twirled his wine glass thoughtfully. "Partly, and partly because I've never met someone who seemed worth navigating those complications for." His eyes met hers. "Until recently." The implication sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Zachary." "Zach," he corrected gently. "My friends call me Zach." "Zach," she amended with a smile. "Are you saying you think I might be worth the complications?" "I'm saying I'd like to find out," he replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. "If you're willing." Grace looked at their joined hands, considering everything he'd shared about the realities of his life. The public scrutiny, the demanding schedule, the responsibilities that came with his position, none of it was trivial. "I believe in approaching challenges honestly," she said finally. "Being clear-eyed about difficulties doesn't mean avoiding them, it just means facing them with awareness. I'd like to see where this might go, complications and all." The smile that spread across his face was genuine and unguarded a rare glimpse of the man beneath the polished exterior. "Then may I suggest we begin with dinner tomorrow night?" he asked. "A proper date, without galas or business discussions." "I'd like that very much," Grace replied, feeling as though something significant had just shifted between them. When he drove her home later, he walked her to her door, maintaining a respectful distance despite the electricity that seemed to hum between them. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "Seeing my mother's collection through your eyes was special." "Thank you for sharing it with me," she replied softly. He hesitated, then leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Instead, Grace moved toward him, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle yet charged with promise. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek with surprising tenderness. When they parted, his eyes were darker, more intense. "Good night, Grace," he said, voice slightly rougher than usual. "I'll see you tomorrow. Good night." "Zach," she replied, enjoying the way his more informal name felt on her lips. As she watched him walk back to his car, Grace felt a curious mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was stepping into unknown territory with a man whose life was vastly different from her own. Yet something about the connection between them felt genuine and worth exploring, despite the complications he'd so honestly outlined. With that thought warming her, she entered her apartment, already looking forward to tomorrow. The following weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of new experiences for Grace. Dating Zachary Foster was nothing like her previous relationships, partly because of his position and wealth, but more significantly, because of the intensity and intentionality he brought to everything. Their first official date set the tone. A private dinner at an exclusive restaurant where he'd arranged for a secluded table overlooking the city. The conversation flowed naturally as they discovered shared interests in historical architecture, obscure documentaries, and surprisingly, murder mystery novels. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a mystery fan," Grace admitted as they discussed a recent bestseller they'd both read. "It's the problem-solving aspect," he explained. "My brain is always looking for puzzles to solve. Reading mysteries gives that tendency a healthier outlet than obsessing over work challenges at 2 a.m. These glimpses into his inner workings fascinated Grace. For all his external success, Zach was refreshingly self-aware about his strengths and limitations. He worked consciously to balance his natural intensity with deliberate moments of relaxation and connection, something he admitted was an ongoing challenge. Their second date was Grace's choice, a visit to a historical letterpress museum where they spent hours examining antique printing equipment and discussing the evolution of typography. Zach's genuine interest and insightful questions revealed his deep appreciation for craftsmanship in all forms. By their third date, a Sunday afternoon sailing on Zach's surprisingly modest boat, they had established a comfortable rhythm together. Grace found herself increasingly drawn to his complex nature. The strategic businessman who could discuss global markets with authority, the devoted brother who rearranged his schedule to attend Lily's school events, and the thoughtful man who remembered how she took her coffee and which authors she enjoyed. For his part, Zach seemed equally captivated by Grace's passion for her craft, her resilience in building a business from scratch, and her unpretentious approach to life. He respected her independence and never attempted to overwhelm her with expensive gifts or grand gestures, understanding intuitively that such tactics would make her uncomfortable. Instead, his thoughtfulness manifested in smaller, more meaningful ways, sending reference books he thought might interest her, arranging for her work to be featured in one of his gallery's upcoming exhibitions, and most touchingly, asking for her input on expanding the Foster Foundation's arts education initiatives. They were careful to keep their relationship separate from Lily's calligraphy lessons, maintaining a professional teacher-student dynamic during those sessions. But Lily wasn't fooled for long. "So, are you guys officially dating now or what?" she asked bluntly one Tuesday, looking up from her practice sheet with a knowing expression. Grace nearly dropped her brush. "That's a rather direct question." "Which you're not answering," Lily pointed out with teenage perspicacity. Sighing, Grace set down her pen. "Your brother and I have been spending time together, yes. Is that okay with you?" Lily considered this with surprising seriousness. "Do you like him for him or for his money?" "Lily," Grace exclaimed, genuinely shocked. I liked your brother before I even knew who he was or what he did for a living. In fact, his wealth is probably the most complicated aspect of getting to know him." The teenager studied her face intently, then nodded. "Good answer. And yes, it's okay with me. He seems happier lately. Less work-obsessed." The simple observation touched Grace deeply. "He cares about you very much, you know." "I know," Lily replied, returning to her calligraphy. "He gave up a lot to take care of me after our parents died." Most 25-year-old guys aren't looking to become guardians to moody preteens. Grace's heart squeezed. For all her occasional teenage attitude, Lily was remarkably perceptive about her brother's sacrifices. The conversation lingered in Grace's mind later that evening when Zach picked her up for dinner at his penthouse, the first time he'd invited her to his home. The apartment occupied the top 2 floors of an elegant high-rise downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular city views. Yet what struck Grace most wasn't the obvious luxury, but the warmth of the space. Unlike the sterile showplaces of wealth she'd imagined, Zach's home reflected genuine personality. Walls lined with art and books, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation, family photographs displayed prominently. It felt lived in and personal. "This isn't what I expected," she admitted as he gave her a tour. "What did you expect?" he asked with amusement. "Gold fixtures and marble everything?" "Maybe a little," she confessed. "This feels like a home, not a statement." His expression softened. "My mother wouldn't have it any other way. She designed most of this space, and after she died, neither Lily nor I had the heart to change much." In the kitchen, surprisingly modest and clearly used regularly, Zach poured wine while Grace admired a collection of handmade pottery displayed on open shelves. "Lily's attempts," he explained with affectionate humor, "from her pottery phase last year." "She mentioned that didn't go so well," Grace recalled. "The teacher said she had creative vision but inadequate technical patience," Zach quoted, handing Grace a glass of wine. Which was a diplomatic way of saying she tried to rush everything and got frustrated when results weren't immediate. "Calligraphy seems different for her," Grace observed. "She actually practices between lessons." "That's why I'm grateful to you," he said seriously. "You've connected with her in a way other instructors haven't. She respects your talent." Their conversation continued through dinner, a meal Zach had cooked himself, revealing yet another unexpected facet of his character. As they enjoyed tiramisu on the terrace afterward, Grace found herself studying his profile against the city lights. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "I'm thinking about what Lily said today," she replied honestly. "About how you gave up a lot to take care of her when your parents died." Zach was quiet for a moment. "I didn't see it as giving up anything," he said finally. "It was just what needed to be done. She was 12, devastated, and needed stability. Everything else was secondary. Still, it can't have been easy suddenly becoming responsible for a grieving adolescent while taking over a global company." He sighed, setting down his dessert fork. "It wasn't. Those first months were difficult." Lily was angry, confused, acting out. "I was drowning in new responsibilities and my own grief. We both made mistakes." "But you figured it out," Grace said softly. "Eventually," he agreed with a small smile. "We found therapists for both of us, which helped, and I realized I needed to delegate more at work to be present for her. It's still a balancing act, but we're in a good place now." The vulnerability in his admission touched Grace deeply. Impulsively, she reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for telling me that." His fingers intertwined with hers. "I find myself wanting to tell you many things I don't usually share," he admitted. "It's somewhat disconcerting. Disconcerting good or disconcerting bad?" she teased gently. Definitely good, he replied, lifting her hand to press a kiss against her knuckles. Unfamiliar, but good. Later, as they stood at her door after he drove her home, their goodbye kiss lingered longer than previous ones, deepening into something more heated. Grace found herself pressed against her doorframe, Zach's strong body aligned with hers as his hands tangled in her hair. The intensity of her response surprised her, a full-body awareness that left her breathless when they finally parted. "I should go," he murmured, though he made no move to step away. "Before I don't want to." Grace nodded, equally reluctant to end the evening. "I'll see you soon. Dinner tomorrow." He suggested, "There's a new exhibition at the Walker Gallery I thought you might enjoy." "It's a date," she agreed, stealing one more brief kiss before he finally stepped back. As she watched him leave, Grace acknowledged to herself what she'd been feeling for weeks. She was falling in love with Zachary Foster, not the billionaire businessman, but the complex, thoughtful man who cooked dinner for her and kept his sister's lopsided pottery on display. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying, because loving a man like Zach meant entering a world she'd never imagined for herself, one with complications she was only beginning to understand. The following weekend brought one of those complications into sharp focus. Grace and Zach had been seeing each other for nearly a month, keeping their relationship relatively private while they established their connection away from public scrutiny. But privacy became impossible when they were photographed holding hands at the gallery exhibition Zach had mentioned. By Monday morning, Grace's phone was blowing up with notifications. Foster's Mystery Woman screamed one tabloid headline, while a business publication took a more restrained approach with Foster Enterprises CEO spotted with local artist. Friends and acquaintances sent screenshots and curious messages, while her social media follower count mysteriously tripled overnight. "I'm so sorry about this," Zach said when he called, his voice tight with frustration. "I should have anticipated there might be photographers at the gallery opening." "It's not your fault," Grace assured him, though she felt distinctly unsettled seeing her face plastered across websites, accompanied by speculation about her relationship with one of the country's most eligible bachelors. "Still, I should have prepared you better," he insisted. "Alexandra is monitoring the coverage and will handle any particularly egregious misrepresentations. And security at your building has been notified to watch for intrusive media presence." The casual mention of involving his security team highlighted just how different their worlds were. "Is it always like this?" Grace asked, trying to keep her voice level. Zach sighed. "Unfortunately, yes. It tends to be cyclical, intense interest followed by periods when something more interesting captures their attention. But once you're on their radar—" "I'm part of the story now," she finished for him. "Are you having second thoughts?" he asked quietly, and she could hear the genuine concern in his voice. Grace considered the question honestly. The invasion of privacy was jarring, and the idea of being perpetually subject to public scrutiny was uncomfortable. Yet when she weighed these downsides against the connection she'd formed with Zach, the way his smile made her heart race, how their conversations flowed effortlessly for hours, the respect and support he showed for her work, the answer was clear. "No second thoughts," she said firmly. "Just adjusting to a new reality." His relief was palpable. "I want to see you tonight. Can I come over? Just a quiet evening, no public appearances." "I'd like that," she agreed. True to his word, Zach arrived that evening in casual clothes, bearing takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant, and a determined focus on making the evening normal despite the abnormal circumstances. They ate cross-legged on her living room floor, discussing their respective days and deliberately avoiding mention of the media coverage. Later, as they cuddled on her small sofa watching an old movie, Zach's phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. He ignored it until the third consecutive alert, then checked the screen with an apologetic glance at Grace. "Alexandra," he explained, frowning at whatever message he'd received. "I should call her." Grace nodded, pausing the movie as he stepped into her kitchen for privacy. His voice was too low to distinguish words, but the tension in his tone was evident. When he returned, his expression was carefully neutral, a look Grace had come to recognize as his business face. "Everything okay?" she asked. He sat beside her, taking her hand. "One of the tabloids is running a piece tomorrow with some creative interpretations of your background. Alexandra got advance notice from a contact." Grace stiffened. "What kind of interpretations?" "They're suggesting you've orchestrated this relationship to gain access to foster foundation funding and gallery representation." His jaw tightened, among other equally baseless insinuations. "That's ridiculous," Grace said, feeling a flush of indignation. "I was commissioned for corporate work and invited to participate in the foundation program based on the quality of my work, not because of any personal connection." "Of course you were," Zach agreed immediately. "Anyone who knows your work recognizes your talent. But tabloids aren't interested in facts, they want narratives that sell, regardless of truth." Grace stood up, suddenly needing to move. "So what happens now? Do we issue denials, ignore it? What's the protocol for being falsely portrayed as an opportunistic gold digger?" The bitter edge in her voice made Zach wince. He rose to join her, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. "We don't engage directly, that only fuels further coverage. Alexandra will have our legal team send a strongly worded letter regarding the most defamatory claims. And we'll ensure that legitimate arts publications covering your gallery exhibition next month focus on your actual accomplishments." His calm, strategic response should have been reassuring, but instead, it emphasized how routinely he dealt with such situations. While this was a shocking disruption to Grace's life, for Zach it was just another Tuesday requiring damage control. "I hate that you have to deal with this because of me," he said quietly, correctly reading her expression. Grace looked up at him, seeing the genuine distress in his eyes. "I'm not upset with you, Zach. I'm upset with a system that turns people's lives into entertainment and twists relationships into calculated transactions." She took a deep breath. "But I knew what I was getting into. You were very honest about the public scrutiny aspect of your life. Knowing about it abstractly and experiencing it directly are very different things," he pointed out. "True," she acknowledged. "But what matters is whether what we're building is worth navigating these challenges. And for me, it is." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "For me too," he said softly, leaning down to press his forehead against hers. "More than you know." They stood like that for a long moment, connected and calm in the eye of a storm neither had created but both now faced. Then Grace tilted her face up, catching his lips with hers in a kiss that gradually deepened from gentle reassurance to something more urgent. Without breaking the kiss, Zach pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed against the small of her back. Grace responded with equal intensity, pouring her complicated emotions into physical connection. When they finally parted, both breathing harder, Zach's eyes had darkened with desire. "If we don't slow down," he murmured, "I won't want to stop." Grace made her decision in that moment, taking his hand and leading him toward her bedroom. "Then don't stop," she said simply. Their lovemaking that night carried the weight of their spoken and unspoken commitments, tender at times, passionate at others, but always with an underlying current of genuine connection that transcended physical pleasure. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in her bed, Grace traced idle patterns on Zach's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice rough with satisfied exhaustion. "That this feels right," she replied honestly. "Being with you like this, despite all the complications." He tightened his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It does," he agreed, "more right than anything has felt in a very long time." Grace fell asleep in his arms, comforted by the certainty that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. The following months brought both challenges and joys as their relationship deepened. The initial media frenzy eventually subsided as predicted, though Grace now found herself recognized occasionally in public, a strange experience for someone who had always lived a relatively anonymous life. More significantly, she had to navigate the subtle power dynamics inherent in dating someone of Zach's wealth and position. While he was scrupulously respectful of her independence, small frictions arose: his instinct to solve problems with resources versus her determination to make her own way. His security team's protective protocols versus her desire for normalcy. His ability to access anything instantly versus her appreciation for working toward goals over time. "I'm not trying to change your life," she explained one evening after declining his offer to have his interior designer redo her apartment's lighting to better showcase her work. "I love that you want to support me, but there's a difference between support and reconstruction." Zach had listened thoughtfully, then nodded. "I'm used to identifying inefficiencies and fixing them," he admitted. "It's how my brain works, but I understand what you're saying. Your life isn't a problem to be solved." His willingness to hear her perspective and adjust his approach accordingly was one of the qualities Grace most valued in him. For all his success and authority, Zach remained fundamentally humble about his own limitations and open to growth both personally and professionally. This became particularly evident as they collaborated on expanding the Foster Foundation's arts education program. What had begun as a small initiative in 4 schools had grown, with Grace's guidance, into a comprehensive curriculum being implemented across the city. Her perspective as a working artist brought practical insights that complemented Zach's administrative and financial expertise. "We make a good team," he observed one Sunday afternoon as they reviewed program feedback in his home office. "Your understanding of artistic development and my system's approach create something neither of us would achieve alone." Grace smiled, touched by his genuine appreciation of her contribution. "It's been amazing watching students discover their creative voices." That 16-year-old boy at Roosevelt High, whose calligraphy piece won the regional competition, he'd never held a brush before our program started. Zach's expression softened as he watched her enthusiasm. "You've changed lives, Grace, including mine." The simple statement, delivered without fanfare, caught her off guard. "How have I changed your life?" He set aside the report he'd been reviewing, giving her his full attention. "You've reminded me that success isn't measured solely by financial metrics or business achievements. That beauty and meaning exist in unexpected places." He reached for her hand. "And you've shown me that it's possible to connect with someone who sees me for myself, not as a resource or an opportunity." Grace squeezed his fingers, knowing how rare such connections had been in his experience. Before they could continue the conversation, however, Lily burst into the office, bubbling with excitement about her successful audition for the school play. "I got the part," she announced, waving the script triumphantly. "Miss Winters said my dramatic reading was unexpectedly nuanced, whatever that means." "It means you were good," Zach explained, rising to give his sister a congratulatory hug. "I'm proud of you for trying something new. Grace helped me practice," Lily admitted. "Her calligraphy lessons improved my public speaking somehow, something about being aware of how your body creates art." Grace smiled at the teenager's insight. "Physicality awareness transfers across disciplines. It's why dancers often make good painters, and musicians can pick up new instruments more easily. See, this is why you should move in with us," Lily declared with typical teenage directness. "I'd have access to wisdom like that all the time." An awkward silence fell. Zach shot his sister a warning look, while Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. They hadn't discussed cohabitation yet, though their relationship had grown increasingly serious over the past 6 months. "What?" Lily said defensively. "You guys are together all the time anyway. And Grace's lease is up next month. I heard her talking about rent increases." "Lily," Zach said firmly, "those are personal matters that Grace and I will discuss privately when we're ready." Recognizing she'd overstepped, Lily had the grace to look sheepish. "Sorry, just thinking practically. I'll go call Madison about the play." She retreated quickly, closing the office door behind her. When she'd gone, Zach turned to Grace with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. Subtlety isn't Lily's strong suit." "It's okay," Grace assured him, though her mind was racing with the implications of Lily's suggestion. "She means well." Zach hesitated, then said carefully, "She's right about one thing, though. Your lease is ending soon. Have you decided what you'll do?" Grace had indeed been weighing her options. Her landlord had notified tenants of a significant rent increase, making the already expensive apartment nearly prohibitive on her artist's income, even with the additional revenue from her growing corporate client base. "I've been looking at other places," she admitted. "Maybe something slightly farther from downtown with more space for a proper studio." Zach nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "That makes sense for your business." She could tell he wanted to say more but was restraining himself. "What are you thinking, Zach? Just say it." He took a deep breath. "I've been considering how to bring this up without making you feel pressured. The truth is, I would love for you to consider moving in with us. But I also completely understand if that feels too fast or too complicated." Grace studied his face, appreciating his obvious effort to respect her independence while being honest about his desires. Over the past months, she had indeed spent increasing time at his penthouse, gradually accumulating a small collection of clothes and personal items there. Lily's comfort with their relationship had grown steadily, evolving from initial curiosity to genuine affection. The three of them had established easy routines together: Sunday brunches, movie nights, even a memorable weekend trip to Zach's lakeside cabin. Yet moving in represented a significant step not just in their relationship, but in Grace's adaptation to Zach's world. His penthouse, while warm and personal, was still a far cry from her modest apartment. Living there permanently would mean accepting a level of luxury and privilege she had never envisioned for herself. "I need to think about it," she said honestly. "Not because I'm uncertain about us, but because it's a big adjustment. And I'd need a separate studio space regardless. Working from home has always been important to my process." Relief crossed Zach's face at her measured response. "Of course. And regarding studio space, the building actually has a vacant commercial unit on the 3rd floor. It was previously an architecture firm's office, so it has excellent natural light. I've been considering acquiring it for the foundation, but if you wanted to use it as a studio space, that would be a perfect solution." Grace raised an eyebrow. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have done some contingency planning, but with zero expectation or pressure, he added quickly. Whatever you decide, I support completely. His consideration touched her deeply. Most men in his position might have simply presented solutions as fait accompli, expecting gratitude rather than consultation. Zach's respect for her agency and independence remained consistent, even as their relationship evolved. "Give me a week to think about it," she requested. "Take all the time you need," he agreed, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. That week proved illuminating for Grace. She toured several potential apartments, trying to envision herself in each space. While some offered practical benefits, none felt quite right. She also visited the commercial unit. Zach had mentioned a beautiful open space with north-facing windows ideal for consistent light without harsh glare. It would make a perfect studio, allowing her to separate home and work life while remaining geographically close. Most significantly, she spent time observing how she felt in Zach's penthouse when he wasn't present. One afternoon, while he was at work and Lily at school, Grace sat alone in the living room, absorbing the environment. Did this space feel like somewhere she could truly belong? Or would she always feel like a visitor in someone else's world? To her surprise, she realized the penthouse already felt familiar and comfortable. She knew which cabinet held her favorite tea, where the throw blankets were stored for chilly evenings, which chair caught the best morning light for reading. Lily had cleared a shelf in the family bookcase for Grace's art reference books, and Zach had installed an adjustable drafting lamp beside her spot on the sofa without fanfare. Small adjustments had been made to accommodate her presence, not with grand gestures, but with thoughtful integration. They had created space for her, literally and figuratively, within their established home. On Sunday evening, exactly a week after their discussion, Grace returned to the penthouse for their usual family dinner. As they cleared dishes afterward, Lily conveniently remembered homework that needed immediate attention, leaving Grace and Zach alone in the kitchen. "I've made my decision," Grace said as they loaded the dishwasher together. "About moving in." Zach's hand stilled, his expression carefully controlled. "And, yes," she said simply, "I'd like to live here with you and Lily, and use that commercial space as my studio if that's still an option." The tension visibly drained from his shoulders, replaced by genuine joy. "It's absolutely still an option," he assured her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you sure about this? I want you to be completely comfortable with the decision." Grace nodded against his chest. "I'm sure. This already feels like home in many ways. And the separate studio space solves my biggest practical concern." He tightened his embrace, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You've made me very happy, Grace Riley. Even though I come with enough art supplies to fill a small warehouse," she teased, leaning back to see his face. "Even then," he confirmed solemnly, though his eyes danced with humor. "We'll make space for every last paintbrush and ink bottle." The move itself was remarkably smooth, thanks largely to Zach's organizational skills and resources. Within 2 weeks, Grace had vacated her apartment, set up her new studio space exactly to her specifications, and integrated her personal belongings into the penthouse. Lily helped enthusiastically, particularly with arranging Grace's books and decorative items, while Zach handled the logistics with his usual efficiency. The first night officially living together, after Lily had gone to bed, Zach opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate. "To new beginnings," he toasted, clinking his glass against Grace's. "And to making space for each other," she added meaningfully. Later, as they lay together in what was now truly their shared bedroom, Grace felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey from teaching calligraphy to Lily to becoming part of their family had been unexpected but beautiful in its organic evolution. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "How unpredictable life can be," she replied. "6 months ago, I had no idea who you were beyond Lily's brother. Now I can't imagine my life without you." His expression turned serious. "I feel the same way. You've brought something essential into my life, Grace, a perspective and presence I didn't know I was missing." He reached toward the bedside drawer, retrieving something she couldn't see. "Which is why I wanted to ask you something tonight." Grace's heart stuttered as he shifted to face her directly, opening his palm to reveal a small velvet box. "I had planned an elaborate proposal," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Reservations at that rooftop restaurant you love, a private violinist, the whole cliché package. But being here with you tonight in our home feels more right." He opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated ring, a central emerald surrounded by small diamonds in a vintage-inspired setting. "This was my grandmother's. My mother always said it should go to someone with artistic hands that would do it justice." Grace's eyes filled with tears as Zach took her hand. "Grace Riley, you've transformed my understanding of what matters in life. You've embraced both the man I am and the family I come with, complications and all. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. In that moment, Grace saw their journey together with perfect clarity, from awkward first meeting to deepening connection, from professional respect to personal intimacy, from separate lives to intertwined futures. "Yes," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't express, Grace marveled at how teaching calligraphy to a teenager had led her to the love of her life. Some things, it seemed, were written in a script more elegant than any she could create with brush and ink, the beautiful, unexpected story of finding home in someone else's heart. 6 months later, Grace stood at the entrance to the Foster family's lakeside property, taking a deep breath of fresh spring air. The expansive grounds had been transformed for their wedding, elegant white chairs, arranged in semicircles on the lawn, flowering branches and calligraphed banners decorating a simple wooden arbor where she and Zach would exchange vows. Inside the main house, Lily was directing final preparations with surprising authority for a 16-year-old. She had appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, bringing enthusiasm and attention to detail that both touched and amused Grace and Zach. "Grace." "There you are," Lily exclaimed, rushing over with a clipboard. "The calligrapher is here for the last-minute place cards, but she has questions about the ink consistency. Only you would understand what she means." Grace smiled at the irony. "The calligraphy teacher needs help from the calligraphy expert on her own wedding day. How fitting." "Well, you insisted on handling all the invitations suite yourself," Lily pointed out. "If you'd let someone else do it, you wouldn't be the only one who understands your specific ink formulation." "True," Grace acknowledged. The wedding invitations had been her personal gift to their celebration, elaborate hand-lettered creations that integrated elements meaningful to their story. Small ink renderings of calligraphy brushes, architectural details from the Foster Foundation building, and lily flowers as a nod to Zach's sister. After resolving the ink crisis, Grace retreated to the guest suite that had been converted into a bridal preparation room. Her mother and Hannah were already there, arranging her dress and accessories. "There's my beautiful daughter," Elizabeth Riley said, embracing Grace warmly. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready," Grace replied with certainty. though I still can't believe how my life has changed in just over a year. From teaching calligraphy to marrying a billionaire, Hannah teased gently. It's like a modern fairy tale. Grace smiled, knowing the comment was well-intentioned but missing the deeper truth. The billionaire part is incidental, she said. I'm marrying the man who reads poetry with me on Sunday mornings, brings soup when I'm sick, and respects my work as much as his own. That's the real fairy tale. The ceremony itself was exactly what they had wanted: intimate and personal. With only 70 guests, including family, close friends, and a few business associates who had become genuine friends. Lily served as Grace's maid of honor, stunning in emerald green that complemented Grace's classic ivory gown. When Zach saw Grace walking toward him, the naked emotion on his face moved many guests to tears. After traditional vows, they had written personal promises to each other, his delivered with steady conviction, hers with artistic eloquence. Both spoke of partnership, respect, and the beautiful unexpectedness of their connection. At the reception, which took place in an elegant tent overlooking the lake, Zachary surprised Grace by unveiling a gift he'd commissioned secretly. A historically accurate reproduction of an antique letterpress, custom-made to her specifications based on measurements Hannah had surreptitiously taken during their museum visit nearly a year earlier. For your new studio expansion, he explained as she examined the magnificent machine with tears in her eyes. So, you can bring your designs into 3 dimensions. The gesture epitomized what Grace had come to love most about Zach: his profound understanding of what truly mattered to her, and his commitment to supporting her passions rather than redirecting them. Later, as they shared their first dance beneath twinkling lights, Zach held her close and murmured in her ear, "Did you ever imagine when I first walked into your apartment to pick up Lily that we'd end up here?" Grace smiled up at him. "Never. You were intimidatingly perfect in your expensive suit, and I had ink stains on my fingers. You were beautifully, authentically yourself," he corrected, which was exactly what I needed without knowing it. As they moved together in perfect synchronicity, Grace reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. From teaching calligraphy to his sister, not knowing the brother picking her up was a billionaire falling for her, to becoming partners in love, life, and shared purpose, it was a story more beautiful than any she could have written with her most elegant brushstrokes. And as Zach dipped his head to kiss her, his eyes full of promise for their future together, Grace knew this was merely the opening chapter of their continuing story, one they would write together, day by day, in the most beautiful script of all. Love expressed through actions, choices, and unwavering commitment to each other's growth and happiness. "I love you, Mrs. Foster," Zach whispered against her lips. "And I love you, Mr. Foster," Grace replied. "Every complicated, wonderful part of you." Around them, their loved ones celebrated, but in that moment, they existed in a world of their own creation, 2 people who had found in each other not just romantic love, but a true home for their hearts, unexpected and perfect in ways neither could have imagined before that first fateful meeting.